Okay, this way.
Hi,
Welcome to the third option. I'm Judy.
and I'm Rick, and we're talking about the letters of Paul, right? We're right in the middle of that. Actually, we're getting towards the end of his letters, at least that part of the New Testament, right? We've been in what I guess we would call the four smaller letters:
Mm.
Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. We've done Galatians, we've done Philippians. Today we are in Colossians.
This is another letter that Paul wrote from prison. So it's one of the prison letters, they
Okay.
call it. It was written around 60 to 62 in the Common Era. And it was written to this church that was meeting in Colossae. Colossae?
Colossae.
The Colossae.
We looked up the pronunciation.
So we were
Colossae,
saying
that rhymes with Hossie or Flossie.
This is one of the few churches that Paul apparently did not plant. Epaphras, not
Yeah.
Epaphroditus, but Epaphras, he was a student of Paul's, and he is the one who actually began the church. He has come to Paul. He's come to visit Paul in prison in Rome to let him know what's going on at the church. And so Paul is writing this letter in response to some of the things that are going on.
Yeah.
And there's some crazy stuff going on.
Yeah. And the crazy things have similarities to some of the other churches that he has
Yes.
addressed in letters too.
There's the Jewish legalism, as always, is creeping in. We also have kind of the pagan philosophy. These people were used to worshiping various Greek and Roman gods, and so they were looking at Jesus as just another one of many gods. There's mysticism, angel worship. There's a variety of things that are kind of pulling the Colossians away from the supremacy of Jesus. And
Yeah.
so Paul is really highlighting that.
It's that same thinking that you have to do more than Jesus. Jesus was not enough. It's sort of like he was kind of a start, and it's almost like now you have to go and get more knowledge. You have to go and whatever you need to get into more of the Jewish rules. And I love the fact that this apostle Paul never budged an inch on any of that. The letter's beautiful in how it's in the wording of it. Of course, he always gives these beautiful greetings in the beginning, and he just acknowledges their faith and how much it means to him and how much it blesses him that they've found the goodness of God. And he says, you have found the grace of God, and after you heard the good news. And then he really gets into in the second chapter, he really gets into the legalism part of it. But before that, he makes these beautiful big statements like, you are complete in him. And I've read that verse, and without understanding the context, I just thought it was a great, really good, powerful verse that meant a lot to me. But when you think about him telling these people that others are telling them, no, you need to go after this, you need to go after that, you should be doing more of this. Apparently, they were being judged by some people that they didn't partake of certain festivals and Sabbath days and different things. And Paul says, don't let anybody judge you in that. He says, you're complete in him. He says, Jesus is the one who's done all of this. It pleased the Father that in Christ all the fullness would dwell in him, and that everything of things in heaven and earth would all be in him. And so he points it up to Jesus, and that's why the book of Colossians is what I used to call the in him book, because there was so much in him, by him, through him. I mean, he's pointing Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It's all about Christ. And it takes all of that off of you. A thing we can miss a lot of times in our religion is that our eyes can turn onto us. And when they do that, they'll often turn away from Christ and what he has done. And I like studying these letters that we've been looking into, because all of these letters of Paul are so strong about it's Christ, it's Christ, it's Christ.
In fact, in the very first chapter, he utilizes what some scholars believe is a poem. But in that poem, he's saying that Jesus is the express image of God, which in that time period would have been very almost threatening to the government, I guess you could say. Nero was the emperor at the time, and he was supposedly insane and was deified. And so to come in and to say, no, Jesus is the ultimate king would put them up to persecution, would actually probably give them some reason to be persecuted.
There was a lot going on in these early churches, weren't there?
Yeah.
I mean, they were getting it from all sides. They would get it
Yeah.
from the pagan culture. They'd get it from the government, from the then they get it from the religion, and and Paul was often addressing what he called false teaching, or and he was so clear and strong on this. And this is what I love about his writings, why I appreciate him so much, is because the more you get into the good news, the more clear and strong you are about Christ and Christ alone. And it really does become less about you and more about him. He even makes a statement after he tells them things like, don't let anybody judge you in the new moons and the festivals and the Sabbaths and all that. He says, because they have an appearance. They do look like they're doing something. They do look like devotion. He says, but they have no power. They don't do anything about the things of the flesh, even the sins of the flesh. They don't do anything about it. But he points everything back to the Spirit. So he says, so if you're risen with Christ, and you are, there again, there's another big statement. You're already risen. You're already complete in him. Christ has already done all the work that's necessary. He reminds them of those things. And he says, so if you're risen with Christ, and you are, then put your attention on that. Where Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father.
Yeah.
And think on those things that are above, and not on these things that are beneath, about going after this and trying to do it by fulfilling religious things and all of that. He turns everything back to Jesus so beautifully.
Would you say that there's 4 chapters in Colossians? Would you say that the first 2 are more doctrinal, more explaining things about God, and the second 2 are really a practical application?
Yeah, in the third and fourth, for sure, you would say that they're more practical, and a lot of his letters do this. It seems like the ones that we've looked at in recent episodes, as they get more towards the end, it's like, okay, now speak the truth to one another, forgive one another.
You 2 ladies, make up.
Yeah.
Like he was saying in the.
Here's another letter here in chapter 3 here in Colossians, where he says, he says, wives, submit to your husband. He said, and husbands, love your wives. And he says, and don't be bitter against them. And he said, and children, obey your parents. And he gets into these practical things like that. And the reason is because this is a good life, that this thing that God is doing in us, it actually works these changes in us. And he's saying, live this new life that you have. This is a beautiful life. You can actually treat people wonderful. You can actually treat people as equals. You can, and you can enjoy that. And it takes you out of that whole world of Roman dominance.
This church actually had another issue, and it was slavery, the slave holders, because Philemon, if you're familiar with the Bible, there's a book of Philemon, and he was a member of this church. He was an upstanding, upright leader in the church, and he was also a slaveholder. And his slave, Onesimus, had escaped. But crazily, I mean, what are the chances? Onesimus escapes, and he somehow runs into Paul and becomes Christian.
A minister, actually, yeah.
Well, at first, he just learns who he is in Christ, and Paul is going to send him back with this letter to the Colossians and a private letter to Philemon, and he's to go back and kind of turn himself in. But Paul is explaining is to the masters, because slavery was a very common practice in the Roman Empire. But he was saying to them, you treat your slaves, you're not their master. Jesus is their master.
Yeah.
Same with wives. You know, in the Roman time, a husband had complete control over the life and death of his wife, his children, and his slaves. They could do whatever they wanted. And here Paul is reminding them that Jesus is their, I don't know if he uses the word owner, but he's the ultimate one. So you're not to treat your children as if you're the sole authority in their life. You're actually just stewarding them, and you're to teach them and get them into maturity and love
and to love them.
and to love them.
And this is where the gospel really hits the issues like this. For one thing, the man and woman relationship, but the slavery thing. I mean, it really confronts it, and he deals with that a lot. And Onesimus was a big part of that whole thing, because Paul's got to talk about this guy who was a slave. Like, where do I stand in this? What does Jesus say about me? And Paul concludes, because of this beautiful revelation of the good news, he says, in Christ, there's no slave or free. He said, it's not about male or female or rich or poor or Jew or Greek, because all are one in Christ. And this is a big revelation.
It is a big revelation. And especially it's toppling the Roman system.
Yeah.
And I would even say the human system, because even outside of the Roman Empire, it seems like people are drawn to power over power, dominance, social status. And he is actually taking the most basic Roman institution, and he's like reshaping it around Jesus. He's reshaping the way their social institution operates.
He really does. And and when you get into the depth of that very thing, to see the oneness of all creation in Christ, of all humanity in Christ. And it really looks like Paul is seeing that, or he has seen that in this revelation. And it certainly has changed how he's viewed things. So he's just telling them, this is what I see now. This is how it really is in Christ. And it's a beautiful thing that, we in the world, we're still, as a whole, coming to that reality. We've still got a ways to go in coming to that reality that we are actually one. We still, in our day here, we still have enemies. We still have villains. And that comes because we still have fear. And the good news of God's love drives out fear, casts out fear. Perfect love casts out fear. And Paul is bringing such a beautiful message to these people, and it touches the behavior of people and the relationships of people like that. It's just to me that 2,000 years ago, how it confronted the issue of slavery, that in some countries it hasn't been ironed out yet, to this day. But I love the gospel and how it all comes down to love God and love your neighbor. And it doesn't matter if it's your wife, it's your child, if it's your servant, or who it is. It comes down to that, and you see the beauty of the gospel in this letter.
For sure. So, if you're not the master and you have a master, Jesus, he leads with self-giving love. So Paul also reminds them of how Jesus exemplified leadership, how he exemplified being a king or a master or someone that we are kind of safe to be under.
Yeah.
He is kind of exploring that and encouraging them to remember that that's the kind of overseer that we have. And then because of that, we're able to deal with the people entrusted to us with that same kind of self-giving love.
Because he reveals to us that there is absolutely no part of the human creation that's not touched by our loving God and our liberating God.
Yeah.
And he loves and liberates all of us, whosoever. And it touches everybody. So another thing that we have in this big idea is that with what Jesus did was so big that it brought forth a new creation. That is spoken of in the book of Colossians. That's one place that we find that he was the firstborn of the new creation. And there again, he's telling this church in Colossae, you're all part of this new creation.
This is who you are.
You don't need all this other stuff that they're trying to bring into you. Yeah. You are complete in him.
Can you talk a little bit about, there's a verse where Paul is telling them to put on the new man and like put off the old man, and put on the new man. You've taught about that quite a bit. So.
Well, we've talked about it, and it came out of a conversation that we were having because we discuss these things sometimes, and we have questions, and we bounce them off each other, and what we believe is what Paul is really saying to this Colossian church, that Jesus did it all. He is all of it, and because of Him, we live. We're in Him. It's done all because of Him, without us adding anything to it. However, he says things like you just quoted there, they're put off the old and therefore put on the new man. And so, when you look that up, what we find is, well, first let me say this: when you hear "put on the new man," there again, it sounds like it redirects something on us, that we have to do something, right? And then then the questions are: so what does that mean? What do we have to do? What do we do to put on the new man? Do we have to study more Bible? Do we have to do this? How do we put on the new man? Well, when you look it up, that word is a particular word, and the definition of it is to sink back into, or like to slip into
like a piece of clothing,
a coat or something. Yeah. And so you're not creating this new man at all. It's already there for you. And he says, sink back into it. Just be there. It's sort of like, be ye the children of God. Now, you can't make yourself be a child. I could not make myself be a child of any family on this earth. I was a child of a certain family, and I'm not going to make that happen. I am that child. But if I don't know that, then I don't know who I am. Someone says, be who you are, basically, is what that says. And even when Jesus says, be perfect as your Father is perfect, be who you are. So you're sinking back into that which is already done. It's kind of like in Revelation, where it says, the bride has made herself ready. And I heard someone preaching on that online not long ago, and he was really adamant. He was saying, see, it doesn't say God makes you ready. It says the bride, we got to make ourselves ready. But that next verse tells how she got ready. It says, come, for the bride has made herself ready. And then it says, and it was given to her to wear white raiment, which is the righteousness of the saints. So the way she got ready was she just received what was given to her.
So the whole sinking back into, or the putting on, is more like a trusting, like an act of trust, an act of
it actually is. It's trust and acknowledging that which is. I'm not going to sink back into this chair if I don't believe it's there.
Or it won't hold you.
Right. Or it won't hold me. But it is there. And because I believe that it holds me, when we go off the air here, I'm probably going to just sink back for a couple of minutes.
I think it's so interesting that he lays the foundation of the things about God, and then he tells this church to trust it in their everyday life. So he's telling them what Jesus did, what the resurrection meant for us, how we're a new creation. And then in the second part, he's actually giving examples of ways to trust it, to receive it, to apply it in our everyday life.
Yeah. And he starts off with that by saying, let the word of Christ dwell in you richly. And then he goes into, and here are the beautiful ways to behave. And that's the fruit. That is the fruit of this life that we've been given. And so it's a good encouragement. I like that.
Yeah.
I like when someone is encouraging to treat your wives with love. I like hearing that. That is beautiful. I love that idea. Yeah. Let's do it. Let's do it more. I love it. I love the idea of when someone says, love your neighbor. Is that some harsh command? Like, no, what are you doing? I'm going to hell if I don't. Nobody's saying anything about that. It's just a beautiful word to love your neighbor. And it's very empowering. So you can look at it like that. It's funny that people will take, whenever Paul gets into the admonishments of like, lie not one to another. Let him who stole steal no more. Those are actually beautiful things. I would steal when I was young, but I like the idea of let him who stole steal no more. I love that. That's a beautiful thing. That's a good thing. That's not a scary thing. That doesn't even seem like a hard thing. It seems like a beautiful thing. I like this new life that I have. And so he's describing the new life. And I'm sure that the hearers, when they heard that letter, They were like, the whole reason they came into this in the first place was because of the newness that it brought into their life. So when they hear these things, they're like, yeah, yeah, I like that. Say that again. That's beautiful.
He really does offer practical, God honoring, relational advice in this letter to the Colossians. And he's really unearthing all the various areas that it has application, like the work child, the husband
How
wife.
revolutionary was the gospel? It's like this was like new ideas to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah.
But it's the way he talks about it. And it really is with a lot of people. Because like you said, you've got you've got a culture of dominance by the man who's either over the household or over something, and they dominate. And Jesus talked about that. He says, you know how people do in this world, the people that have authority, says they lord things over you. They're very dominant over you, and they exert power. He says, but in the kingdom, it's a whole different thing. You don't have to do that. Love will be that power. And I love what love does. First, it liberates us inside so that we are actually powerful enough to act out that love. As we're learning that love, we can act it out because the love chases out fear and gives us confidence. It drives out the fear of like, if I just love somebody, I'm going to be a doormat. Well, the love of, as it grows in us, it doesn't happen just overnight, but as it grows in us, it drives out that fear to where you trust it enough and you enjoy it enough and you can joyfully go ahead and give love without being afraid. Love your wives. Don't be afraid that she's going to use that love against you and try to become the dominant one. Love her and see if she responds. Love your raise your children that way. Love your neighbor. You don't have to win. You don't have to be dominant over them. You don't have to be afraid, but you can trust God with this because faith works by that love that's in our heart. It always comes down to that. It always comes down to love. Love is the power.
And you say this frequently, but that love makes you bigger. You
get big inside.
You can't be the doormat if you're above, and bigger inside.
And that's why he says, set your attention on things above because you're risen with Christ. When you don't believe that, when you don't trust in that love, then you're not doing it out of that same motivation. You can be a doormat by just capitulating to people or being a people pleaser or hoping they're going to like you if you'll do whatever they say. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a bigger motivation that says, I'm big enough to love you in your mistakes, in your infallibility, even though you don't understand. I am big enough to love you and I can give to you and it will not deplete me because this is a spring that doesn't run dry.
An unending source. So it can't really run out.
Absolutely.
I was thinking, sometimes when I have felt, I don't know, other people's judgment of me had more sway, it was because I wasn't placing the value on what God says over what they say, what they think. And it would hook me.
Yeah.
But it again is an area of growing that the Lord had to help me see on a deeper and deeper level. Because I think I would have said, I knew that, but as long as there was still some, I don't know, struggle with that person is thinking that or that person is saying that. And it was like, oh, I'm putting more attention on that than I am on what
There's
God
a beautiful growth in this revelation because you can know it to a certain degree and that's made a difference in your life. And then you can come into a situation where it's like, whoa, this one's hard. And so then we have an opportunity to learn something in that and to grow in that. And we continue to grow in that. But because that growth in the knowledge and trust in his love, it continues to establish our own validity and our own worth where less and less we get it from outside sources. And we don't use what we think people might be thinking about us as much as we don't use that as our mirror so much anymore as the knowledge of the truth that we know what God thinks of us.
Yeah, you become sturdy in it.
Yeah, and God knows more than people do. So he's probably right.
He knows the He knows the whole
So what he
story.
thinks of me is probably right.
Yeah. I just want to encourage everyone to read the book of Colossians. It's only 4 chapters and it's really interesting. But I guess the other part is I would encourage you to read the book of Philemon. It's only 1 chapter.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful letter that sort of coincides with Colossians, where he is addressing Philemon, the slave owner and church leader. He's honoring him and exhorting him, but also, I don't know what the right word is. It's encouraging him to welcome Onesimus, his runaway slave, back and to treat him as if he is a brother and whose master is the same as his, Jesus.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just, in that day and age, that letter along with this would be remarkable. And the fact that he sends Onesimus with the letters, he's sending it with Tychicus and Onesimus. It says it in the last chapter.
And that what Paul is telling Philemon, it really establishes worth for every human being.
Yes.
Some can be the business owner, some can be the worker. I mean, one can make more money than the other, but the worth of the individual is exactly the same. And to see it like that makes you relate and really act very differently toward your fellow man. You become much more empathetic and understanding towards other people. And that's another wonderful thing.
I think that's a really good example. And example you give to the world is how you treat people, people who work for you, people who are over you, different cultures. How you treat them is really
that's what Jesus said, right?
the light that you offer the world, right?
They'll know by your love one for another.
Yeah.
Thank you for watching.
Yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book of Colossians, letter to Colossians.
I love it. It's beautiful.
All right. I think we're going to end here.
We got on our next episode, we have a very beautiful book.
We're moving on to Ephesians next.
Yeah. Some call it the mountaintop of the gospel.
So thank you for spending some time with us today. If you know somebody who might be encouraged by this episode, please share it with them and, feel free to reach out to us on our social media or our website, which is rickmanis.com.
Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.